Usually when we talk about a massive technological breakthrough, there's this expectation of just pure acceleration.
Oh, absolutely. Like faster is always better.
Right. It's like strapping a rocket engine to a roller coaster. You just sort of brace yourself, grip the safety bar, and really just hope the tracks hold.
Yeah, you just kind of hold on for dear life.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of long-term global infrastructure,
Mhm.
and suddenly, that rocket engine feels genuinely terrifying.
Well, yeah, because the stakes are so much higher.
They are, because right now, the computational landscape that's running our world is essentially all gas and absolutely no brakes.
Mhm.
But today, we are looking at a 10-year blueprint that is meant to change that trajectory, like fundamentally altering human civilization.
And, I mean, that really isn't an overstatement at all. For decades now, our computing power has been fundamentally binary. It's just this endless, unquestioned acceleration of speed.
Just pushing forward.
Right. But today, we are unpacking the brake pedal that was designed for the physical world. We're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating source video titled Ternary Logic Blueprint 10 Years.mp4.
Which is such a dense, incredible source.
It really is. It gives us this deep look into the future of ternary logic and, a long-term outlook on how our machines might actually process reality itself in the coming decades.
Okay, let's unpack this because it all stems from one foundational rule in the source material, which is called the Goukassian Vow. And it's basically the axiom of this entire new architecture.
The absolute bedrock of it.
Right. And the vow, like word for word, is pause when truth is uncertain, refuse when harm is clear, proceed where truth is.
What's fascinating here is just how entirely countercultural that is to modern engineering.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, in today's tech ecosystem, uncertainty is treated as a math problem. Yeah. It's just a hurdle you compute your way out of as quickly as humanly possible.
You just throw more processing power at it.
Exactly. If a binary system doesn't know the exact answer, it's designed to approximate, to use probabilistic models, or just brute force a solution.
Yeah, just guess fast.
Right. But this vow introduces this completely revolutionary concept that sometimes the most advanced, sophisticated calculation a system can possibly make is to simply stop, wait, and verify.
But, implementing that kind of pause into systems that are literally designed to operate at light speed, that requires a staggering amount of structural engineering.
A mind-boggling amount, yeah.
And before we get into how this completely rewrites the hardware of the next 10 years, you really need to understand the deeply personal race against time that birthed this framework. Because the visionary architect behind this blueprint is a man named Lev Goukassian.
And the circumstances of how he built this are just as heartbreaking as they are brilliant.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't operating with some massive corporate R&D budget over a decade. He built this while he was actively dying.
Which is just wild to think about. The sheer volume of output is really hard to wrap your head around. Because in just 6 months, working from home with his dog, Vinci, by his side, Lev built 2 massive governance frameworks.
2 entire frameworks.
Yeah. And published 65 academic works and wrote 400 stories in 6 months.
It's almost superhuman.
It really is. Working relentlessly through the physical reality of his own fading life during what he actually called the time when his own mortality was visible.
And that timeline, I think, is what anchors this entire deep dive in the theme of safe governance.
How do you mean?
Well, Lev's impending death kind of stripped away all the short-term superficial concerns that usually plague tech development. He wasn't, worried about quarterly profits or beta testing a minimum viable product to please investors.
Right, he didn't care about a product launch.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had the ultimate perspective on long-term survival because he was literally looking at the end of his own timeline. His only concern was what was going to be left behind for everyone else.
But how does one dying man actually code something this fast? He wasn't just sitting in a text editor typing out millions of lines of code by himself.
Oh, no, not at all.
The source describes him as a grand conductor of an AI symphony. Like, he orchestrated 9 distinct, highly advanced AIs simultaneously.
Right, he was essentially using them adversarially against each other.
Wait, like making them fight?
Basically, yeah. He
Yeah.
wasn't just asking them to write code. He was stressing their logic, forcing these 9 super intelligent models to argue with each other, pushing them to build this safety net from first principles.
That is insane. It's like trying to conduct a choir of 9 supercomputers, and your goal is to somehow get them to sing in perfect ethical harmony while they are simultaneously trying to outcalculate one another.
That's a really good way to put it.
But it raises such a poignant question for you as a listener. When you are facing your immediate mortality, you could spend your final months doing literally anything. Traveling, just being with family.
Just resting, yeah.
But Lev chose to spend it building an intricate computational safety net, just to fix a flaw in how machines think.
Because that flaw is existential. I mean, Lev realized that trying to force an AI to act ethically was completely impossible if the underlying hardware was still screaming at it to go faster.
The hardware itself was the problem.
Yes. The flaw wasn't just in the software, it was in the fundamental binary logic of the computer itself.
So let's get into the mechanics of that, the difference between binary speed and ternary logic. Because if you look at binary logic, which runs literally everything in our world right now, it optimizes for raw speed and pure capability.
Right, ones and zeros.
Exactly. A binary logic gate is either a 1 or a 0, on or off, true or false. It asks one very specific question: can we compute this?
Exactly. Binary calculation is this relentless feed-forward loop, and the source actually gives a perfect real-world example of this danger.
The cloud seeding one?
Yeah. Imagine an autonomous system using binary logic calculates the barometric pressure in the atmosphere over a region. It processes all the meteorological data and concludes, I have the capability to chemically seed these clouds and force it to rain.
Because it's binary, if the capability is there and the command is given, it just executes. It doesn't govern the consequences.
It just acts.
Right. It just says, I can do it, therefore I am doing it. It's like an incredible sports car with a massive engine, but absolutely no steering wheel.
That is a terrifying image, but very accurate.
Amazing at moving forward, terrible at avoiding the cliff.
Yeah, and that's where ternary logic alters the foundational question. Instead of asking, can we execute this? It asks, may we execute this?
Oh, may we? That's a big shift.
It's huge. It introduces a totally new optimization metric that Lev called survivable legitimacy.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because if we look at how binary calculation predicts rain, a ternary system actually pauses. It asks if reality actually deserves to have those clouds seeded in the first place.
Right. It evaluates the downstream fallout.
Exactly. Like, what happens to the crops 50 miles away that now experience a drought because you forced the rain to fall early here?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, binary computation accelerates our possibilities exponentially. But without ternary logic, we have absolutely no mechanism to govern the real-world consequences of those possibilities.
We are just accelerating completely blindly.
Entirely blind.
So if a binary system is like that runaway train with no track switches to divert it from a cliff, ternary logic introduces a switch. But, a philosophical vow to do no harm is really just theory.
Sure, sounds nice on a whiteboard.
Yeah, a constitutional framework sounds beautiful on paper, but how does a computer actually mechanically pause? I want to move this from abstract philosophy to functional architectural reality.
Well, that brings us to the core concept of the epistemic hold.
The epistemic hold.
Yeah. This is a structural pause that is physically forced into an ecosystem that is historically obsessed with velocity.
And the source uses Lev's own metaphor for this, which I just think is brilliant.
The ship captain metaphor.
Yes. He said that when a sudden, violent storm completely removes the horizon, a seasoned ship captain doesn't just guess the bearing and slam the throttle forward.
They don't just cross their fingers and hope for the best.
Right. They don't rely on probabilistic models to avoid the rocks. They reef the sail and they wait, recognizing that uncertainty isn't a bug in the system. It is actually the true form of navigation.
And that concept is crystallized into what the framework calls state zero, or the sacred pause.
A sacred pause.
Yeah, because in our current binary systems, hesitation is seen as an error. Like a buffering wheel means something is broken or inefficient.
We all hate the buffering wheel.
Right. But state zero elevates hesitation into constitutional infrastructure. It is the electrically enforced dignity of waiting until hard evidence arrives, proving that waiting is a vital safeguard, not a glitch.
But wait, in modern tech culture, we treat even a millisecond of buffering as a catastrophic failure. How difficult will it be to culturally rebrand waiting as wisdom? And how do you enforce that operationally?
Right.
Like, if an AI determines a massive update to a major city's power grid is technically efficient, what actually stops it from just immediately executing the update?
Because intelligence alone isn't enough to pass state zero. The action has to clear 3 distinct checkpoints known as the 3 artifacts of execution.
The 3 artifacts, okay.
Yeah. Every consequential action must pass through this gauntlet. First, the system must acquire the lantern.
Which does what exactly? Because illuminating the data sounds a bit, I don't know, like magic.
It's not magic, it's cryptography. The lantern is essentially a cryptographic consensus mechanism. Its job is to verify the unvarnished truth of the system state. It doesn't just trust a single sensor or a local data feed. It asks, what is the objective, verifiable reality of the power grid right now? It requires decentralized, cryptographic proof of the environment. No assumptions, no approximations.
Okay, so it proves the actual state of reality. You have the truth.
Right. But truth without accountability is just a liability. So before the clock cycle can move forward, the system must acquire the second artifact, which is the signature.
The signature.
Yes, and this attaches strict, non-reputable identity and accountability to the action.
Meaning you can't have, like, an anonymous algorithm or a black box neural network making a citywide change in the dark.
Precisely. The signature creates a mathematically traceable chain of custody. If this grid update happens, exactly who or what algorithm, operating under whose authority, is responsible for it.
Wow, okay.
And finally, if it has the lantern and it has the signature, it must obtain the third artifact, the license.
Which is civilization's final checkpoint.
Yes. The license is a smart contract-style constitutional check. It determines if the action is legally and ethically permitted against a baseline survivability metric.
So even if the AI is super smart and says it's a good idea.
Exactly. The AI's intelligence might say the grid update is hyper-efficient, but the license evaluates if it is actually survivable and legitimate for the population. Every single one of these checkpoints must cryptographically clear before the action can proceed.
It is an incredible gauntlet, but, you know, it seems to lead to a massive glaring vulnerability to me.
How so?
Well, state zero, the epistemic hold, the artifacts, it all sounds incredibly robust. But if this is just a software layer, it can be hacked, right? If you know how to manipulate the code, you can just rewrite the operating system to bypass the artifacts entirely.
You've just hit on the most crucial part of Lev's 10-year outlook.
Yeah.
Because you're totally right. Currently, overriding AI safety guidelines is essentially like picking a cheap padlock on a software door.
Right. You jailbreak the model. People do it all the time.
Exactly. But the long-term vision of this blueprint is something called mandated ternary, which brings us to what he calls substrate law.
Substrate.
Yes. In 10 years, the pause won't happen in hackable software. It will happen in the voltage states of the silicon itself. Future processors will physically embody constitutional restraint.
So what does this all mean? I really want to dig into how this works physically. Because in a standard binary microchip, you have billions of transistors acting as logic gates, right?
Right.
And they rely on two states, a high voltage for one and a low voltage for zero. So how does substrate law actually change the physical physics of it?
By utilizing a true ternary logic gate, instead of just two states high and low, these future processors operate on base 3 logic.
Okay.
They use a positive voltage state, a negative voltage state, and a highly stable electrically enforced neutral zero state. That zero state is the physical embodiment of the epistemic hold.
So it's less like putting up a do not enter sign on a software road that any program can just drive past, and more like building a completely impenetrable physical brick wall across the road.
A titanium wall, really.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how badly the AI wants to execute the command. If the physical tumblers inside the silicon don't align with the cryptographic parameters of the three artifacts, the circuit literally cannot complete. The electricity won't flow.
Exactly. Bypassing the ethical checks of the system would require violating the actual laws of physics. The silicon simply will not allow it. Ethics completely transitions from being, a nice-to-have corporate web page policy to becoming an inescapable physical law of the hardware powering our world.
Which completely rewrites how our entire global economy operates.
No, it changes everything.
If ethics are physically baked into the silicon, it forces civilization to shift from short-term exploitation to long-term survival. I mean, Lev had this incredibly profound quote in the source material, "The unborn have no lobbyists. Conscience must speak for them."
That quote is so powerful, and it's really the beating heart of what he called triadic economic logic.
Triadic meaning three?
Yes. It's called triadic because it balances 3 points: the present actor, the present environment, and the future inheritor. Ternary logic doesn't just evaluate the immediate present. It forces systems to account for damage well before the invoice arrives.
Let's project this, say, 15 years into the future to see it in action.
Okay.
Imagine a massive energy corporation wants to deploy a highly efficient but highly toxic automated extraction algorithm. Today, environmental debt is an easily ignored external cost. You just move it to a different column on the spreadsheet and let someone else deal with the fallout in 50 years.
We see that all the time.
Right. But under substrate law, the hardware literally will not process the extraction order if it attempts to impoverish the future for today's convenience.
Goukassian argued that a system that's constantly externalizing moral cost will eventually internalize moral decay. If you always push the damage onto tomorrow, tomorrow eventually just collapses under the weight of it.
But how do you actually enforce this economically? Because realistically, a massive profit-driven energy corporation isn't going to voluntarily transition to hardware that outright refuses a profitable order just to protect a future generation.
They'd fight it tooth and nail.
Exactly. They'll just manufacture their own binary chips in a rogue state to bypass it.
Well, this raises an important question about the global supply chain, and it is precisely why mandated substrate law targets the semiconductor manufacturing bottlenecks.
Oh, at the manufacturing level.
Right. The architecture of ternary logic is fundamentally superior at preventing catastrophic, cascading system failures. And even the most greedy corporations want to avoid those to protect their own assets. By making this the foundational standard for all advanced computing, you remove the choice from the corporations.
Because it's baked into the only chips available.
Exactly. The voice of tomorrow becomes structurally represented in the transactions of today. If you want access to the global network, you have to abide by the physics of the silicon.
But, I mean, if we are embedding a physical choke point for global infrastructure into the hardware of the future, that gives whoever holds the patents to this technology an incomprehensible amount of power.
It would be terrifying.
Yeah. A framework with the ability to physically block corporate actions and govern the world's processing power would be incredibly dangerous if one entity owned it. And that leads to Lev's final radical act before his death.
You really have to ask, who controls this world-changing technology in the decades to come? Who gets to push the firmware updates for human ethics?
And the answer is absolutely no one. Lev executed a cryptographically protected voluntary statement of inheritance. He transferred zero ownership rights to any person, any corporation, or any government entity whatsoever.
Which is just unheard of.
The entire blueprint reverts directly to the public domain.
He deliberately structured it as an unownable open inheritance. He stipulated legally that any attempt to patent, enclose, or privatize the frameworks is a direct violation of their constitutional integrity.
It's an unownable open inheritance.
Yeah, and it is vanishingly rare for a tech visionary to entirely refuse ownership of a creation with this much leverage. But by open sourcing the hardware governance model, he ensured that the governance of our distant future cannot be monopolized by a single trillion-dollar entity.
Or some digital dictator.
Exactly.
There was a final README file tucked into the public repository. It was updated just days before his death. Signed, Lev Goukassian, Santa Monica, California, May 2026.
Gives you chills.
It really does. It was a letter to future stewards, basically stating that the architecture of assured governance doesn't require his presence anymore. It requires our judgment, which brings the focus right back to you, listening to this deep dive.
Yeah, to all of us.
Is human nature actually ready to inherit a tool of this magnitude? One that requires us to act as its ethical stewards rather than its billionaire owners?
It is the ultimate stress test for our species, really. Yeah. The specifications for the next decade are final. The blueprints are locked in.
The math is done.
Right. The technical roadmap to embed these crucial pauses into the physics of our machines is brilliantly mapped out. But an architectural framework only survives if there are institutions and individuals with the discipline to actually uphold it.
And that's where we find ourselves today. The missing piece of this incredible technological puzzle is us. The hardware can enforce the pause, but we have to be the ones who decide what survivable legitimacy actually looks like. Will we step up to be the institutions that maintain a survivable future, or will we just let the unchecked momentum of binary speed continue to make our choices for us?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leaves me with one lingering thought to really mull over.
Oh, what's that?
Well, if the future of computing requires a hard-coded physical state zero to protect the unborn, what if we start applying the concept of the sacred pause to our own messy human biology today?
Oh, wow, I like that.
Right. If we literally mandated a cognitive epistemic hold for ourselves, forcing our own brains to acquire the lantern, the signature, and the license before making our own irreversible life choices, how wildly different would the trajectory of our personal lives look a decade from now?
Taking the ternary logic out of the silicon and mapping it onto our own daily decisions. finding our own internal brake pedal. Because honestly, if we keep treating our own lives like that runaway train, driven purely by what we can do rather than what we should do, we might just accelerate right off the edge.
Yeah, we really might.
But if we can learn to reef the sail when the storm hits, to just sit in the uncertainty and wait for the truth to illuminate, maybe we actually stand a chance at navigating what comes next.